There we go. All right. We'll call this July 8th, 2024 meeting of the Parks and Advisory Board meeting to order. Start the roll call.
Aaron Angel. Here. Scott Conlon.
Here.
Thomas Davis.
Yeah.
Paige Lewis. Here. Sam Libby.
Here.
Nick Novello is not here, and Council Liaison Sean McClay.
Present.
Thank you. Approval agenda. Any additions from the board or staff? Okay. Motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Motion second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Last month's minutes. Any comments on the minutes or corrections? Hearing none, I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, next is public invited to be heard. Any public here to speak? This is all staff. Okay. Nobody here, okay.
We felt like we needed to outnumber you.
I see that. It's very effective. Whatever you're about to drop will be very substantial. And we'll start with our old business. Item A is update on Greenway Phase 13.
Okay, so I'm just here to sort of give you an overview of St. Bernard Greenway Phase 13 because, well, we can share the alignment. We haven't had it on our website because we've had some acquisition issues with right away with this parcel. So we went to council 2 weeks ago on Tuesday and requested authorization to use the city's power of eminent domain to acquire that 0.94 acre trail easement, because we've been coordinating with that landowner for almost 2 years, a year and a half. We sent them a couple offers to purchase the trail easement, but they've refused to sell us just the easement. They want to sell us the entire parcel. And it's a little over 5 acres. And we looked into, using city funds to purchase the entire parcel, but we couldn't use it for trail purposes. Like, we looked at maybe a parking lot, but it wouldn't really help alleviate any of the parking issues at Sandstone Ranch. And it's across the street from, this is St. Bernard State Park, and they have paid parking, so we didn't want to kind of conflict with that. And also it just being right on 119, it wasn't practical, use of our funds. And we did talk to other city departments, but there's really no need for that parcel. So we did receive authorization to move forward with eminent domain as an option, like of last resort. So we are working with special counsel to provide a final offer. Maybe we'll provide one more offer and then the final offer. And that final offer, we needed the city's authorization to use eminent domain to actually provide that. So we're hoping, they'll come around, but it's been over almost 2 years of them saying, no, we will only sell you the entire parcel. They recently put the parcel up for sale about, I think in March, April or May, we noticed it. So, and they're asking about a little over almost $3.5 million for the entire parcel. And our initial offer was $467,000 for the 0.94 acre easement. So we will work with special counsel to determine a value to be our final offer. But yeah, so here's the alignment though too, because we're gonna check in with special counsel on Wednesday to make sure it's okay to put this on the public facing website, because that's our intent. But yeah, and it goes from Sandstone Ranch all the way, this is, so it's all city-owned property, and then you get here, and this is a privately owned property, but we have, the city holds a conservation easement over it. So we've been working with that property owner to acquire the necessary easements. And then it goes over city-owned land. There's a bridge here to avoid, it's an easement that we had to avoid, sorry, Daniel, do you remember the? American Tower, yeah, easement, so we can't have the trail on that property. So there's a bridge there, and then it hugs this property line, and they've agreed to donate the easements, that property owner. And then it goes across this parcel up to the north. And then it will be a concrete culvert under 119. And then it'll go east, and there's a bridge over the St. Vrain Creek, and then it'll connect to the trail system in St. Vrain State Park. So yeah, so I'm just here to give you kind of an overview of, you know, those recent happenings and see if there are any questions I can answer about just the trail in general or the project in any way.
Yes, that corner. Yeah, for those of you who are on the field trip, Kate was just asking, we were at that corner where 5 turns behind American Tower. Yeah, we were kind of standing there looking over the landfill area, but then because they built all these, we couldn't see over here. We wanted to show you this, but you got the sense of how it feels to be up above all of the, and this is our Boulder Creek Estates, our first open space that we ever purchased.
So yeah, this trail will avoid like fragmenting that habitat, staying out of the floodway.
Can I ask about that? Just the alignment along the edge of that parcel, why can't it be just inside the city-owned parcel?
It's a fairly steep slopes there.
Okay, so
So
it's that close to the edge there that it
it's-
just can't be up down.
Yeah, and that's really like, we've argued, you know, it's unbuildable, that portion of the land too. But yeah, and we need to, for FEMA purposes, we can't put fill in the floodway, in the floodplain. It's also CDOT wouldn't allow that, and this is a partially grant-funded project through that CDOT administers, so we have to follow all of their rules and regulations. So also in negotiations too, we're using a CDOT-approved negotiator, or acquisitions agent they call it. So they have to do all the discussions on our behalf with the landowner. So we're involved, but it does separate us a bit from the negotiations.
These will all be great points to put on the website.
Yeah,
People aren't like, why is there eminent domain? Those are great reasons why you have to do it, but
yeah.
make sure that's covered maybe.
Well, and just so you know, the only email I received from this was from Ruby Bowman in regards to her comment saying that somehow way back in the day, we agreed not to ever use eminent domain, and I don't think that's true. I think maybe that was, we agreed that that would be absolutely the last resort, and so trying to complete this is really important to not only Longmont, I think, but also to the state. So I think it's one of those things where we should use our money appropriately and not buy a $3 million parcel of land that we don't really have a use for.
I would also say there's a distinction between using open space funds for eminent domain, and so that's something that we're being mindful of on this project.
And so that was the only email I received negatively about the discussion, the concept of use of eminent domain.
And I did talk to some folks about the proximity to the eco roost areas and nests. And again, as we went out there and our last site and looking at this map, we have pushed this as far away. And I think there's some concern that why there wasn't more public involvement, but we worked with, Danielle can add all the other outlets, I think there's CPW, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the flood management portion of the state's CDOT group. So we've really worked with everyone we could, and if you look at that, there's really no way we could push it any further away from those roosts. But again, I think all those people that are out there, I think it's a great opportunity for people to learn about those things from that higher level. You're back your way, but I think the ability to see that is a really important piece. But Danielle and her team really did a great job of taking a lot of information and threading the needle as best they can.
With the underpasses, there was talk about having to have permanent pumps at one time.
I believe, yeah, there still will be one.
And who's maintaining them? Is the state?
That would be
or
the city.
The city.
Mhm.
Ops.
Oh, I didn't hear you either. I couldn't hear you either.
Oh, sorry.
You
Yeah,
got the squeaky chair. too.
yeah, I'm sorry. And yeah, and then there's a tie back to wherever that is, 5.5.
Yeah,
Is that what
it's
the
more
green
like a sidewalk connection there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the rest of the path is similar to what 119 is way over by Walmart then. So in terms of width and, you know.
Yeah, I
what
believe
the path
it's
looks like.
10 feet in concrete on the north side, so the green indicates crusher fines, and then the turquoise is when we'll be doing concrete.
Okay, are we putting any trees in? Big complaint over on the other side is that it's hot as heck to try to ride.
No, that hasn't been part of the project.
One of the things with trees out in these areas is really that, again, trees are not native along these areas at all. The only way we get them to even start is by having irrigation. If you think about the amount of irrigation with, maybe it pumps from the, but yeah, it really is, you know, it's a significant cost to try to get water out to get those trees out in those areas.
And also, this is looking back at our St. Vrain master plan, that divided the entire St. Vrain Greenway going through the city all the way from west to east into sections, the rural reach, the preserve reach, the urban reach. This is the preserve reach, so this is the reach where, as much as we can, we're trying to make the trail blend into the landscape. So crusher finds the concrete areas of the trail are because we're putting in bridges, or we're gonna have major erosion problems like on the drop off to Boulder Creek Estates there behind the storage unit, so we have to have concrete there. But other than that, we're not planting trees, we're not planting, you know, horticultural flowers. This is the preserve reach, so as much as possible, match the landscape with fencing, make it as natural as possible.
And one other alignment question, did you look at all of using County Road 5 there as alignment, other than going behind the storage facility?
Yeah, they did look at that, and there's not much, let me see. There's not much room there for the shoulder, like it would have been a really tight squeeze anyway, and then it does go up quite a bit in grade, so it would have been really difficult to even fit the trail in and keep it ADA compliant. And then, you know, they were looking at coming through here, but this was already developed by the time we got through to the design phase far enough, so that ended up not being an option. But yeah, and then, you know, it's been suggested like go along 119, but we're really trying to balance like user experience and safety. And I don't even know that CDOT would have allowed that within the, you know, that plan.
I mean, really looking at safety with the trucks that come in and out of there, and just the traffic in general and the driveways, just not wanting that to be the trail experience for
Yeah, I mean, that's
families and commuters.
storage.
It's not really.
Because that's like a storage area too, so you've got a lot of truck traffic all through here too.
On the north side of the trail, there's gonna be a fence or something, because I can see otherwise people will create a social path cutting across those empty lots to get to those, just say, two breweries under there.
So there's some fencing, but really it's to keep them off of this portion of the property. There's not a fence on that side. There's a fence, like a concrete wall over here because it's the training center.
Right.
So we do have that over there. There's a privacy fence over here.
There's a drop down to those businesses too. Like if you think about the back of Collision Brewing, if you've ever looked back there, it's like a big wall. They like graded in to make their parking lot, so the trail's kind of like up above. So
Yeah.
it was interesting. Well, yes, and part of this back in the day is looking at, are we gonna go along the back of those businesses and be on that business HOA property instead of where the line is showing now on the private there, the Hayes private?
Yeah.
Be just a little north of that. Can we be at the back of all of those businesses? And so we had meetings and conversations with that business HOA and talked to them about their concerns, you know, and just the fact that with this trail come more ranger presence. So those were the types of conversations that we had with the business HOA.
Okay.
It will always work. I mean, if things develop and we see things that may be needed in the future, we'll definitely continue to work with neighbors out there too.
The last question was, does that affect the schedule at all, the need to go through this process?
Yeah, it's
So where does
delayed
that change
where we're
things?
going to construction. So the CDOT grant, there was a design phase that we used the funding, and now we have 1.25 million of a grant that we need to use by June 30th, 2025. And so that also means we need to match that amount, so $2.5 million of the construction needs to be completed by then. So it has delayed things, but this is an expensive project, so we still think we're on track to be able to meet that deadline. But yeah, it's put us significantly behind schedule in terms of timing.
Do you need to wait for the whole thing to be kind of agreed to before we can start parts of it?
There is, CDOT offers a right-of-way conditional clearance, so we need to get their clearance to proceed to go to construction bid. But first, we have to at least show where we are. So they would like all the right-of-way acquisitions complete, but there is an option to do this conditional clearance. So if basically they said we need to have all first offers out and the response, we need to know, if we're gonna need to go to eminent domain for that property. And then the parcel the property owners that are donating, we need to have their property donation form done. So we're really close with all of that, but those are the key points. And then we've had initial discussions, but that's when we can really know if they'll let us go that route.
Other questions? Thank you for that. Great. Okay, next to new business. Community engagement, connecting Longmont communities to the outdoors. Welcome back.
Thank you. So this is mostly gonna be an update on all of that grant stuff that I've told you guys about several times now. Now we're sort of in the middle of the season, so things look a little bit different. Alright. Oh boy. What is this like? Oh, the mouse.
Or this.
Try to get from this screen to that screen.
Was it on your?
It's on my screen.
Yeah.
Drag it to the right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
try to go over.
With regards to the right.
PowerPoint.
My mouse doesn't show up on the screen at all.
Retrieving it.
I can do that. Here, I have no mouse on this one. Yeah.
I think you gotta move the mouse all the way to the right. I think it's off the radio screen, off the TV.
There's no mouse over there either.
Is the mouse connected?
So
She will be
working because she's plugged in, right? This is her mouse.
Right.
that's my mouse, but it doesn't reach. I'm gonna do that. So it's just, just grab right in the middle. Does that work? Just close it up here now. Hey! I don't know what you did, but thank you. Great. Okay, cool. Longmont Nature Kids. So this is, again, I'm Taylor. I'm the volunteer and education program person. So Longmont Nature Kids we're just sort of starting it, and this is the project that's going to continue until about 2031-ish. This is what we're planning for things to sort of look like now that we're somewhat underway. So this will be 15 plus collaborators providing a range of opportunities. So that's including, parks and natural resources, recreation, community and neighborhood resources, the youth center and children, youth and families, and then some external organizations as well. CSU Extension, Thorn Nature Experience, Wildlands Restoration Volunteers, Calwood. We have a whole bunch of collaborators involved. What we're thinking this will probably look like once we
So right now we're in the survey phase, we're in the community assessment phase, which I'll get to in a few slides, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. But the overall view of this is that eventually this will turn into summer programming for youth and families, including summer camps, family programming, stewardship activities, outdoor learning, that kind of stuff, as well as in-school programs, so field trips and in-class programs, potentially. And then for older kids, career pathways, so potential for paid internships, youth leadership opportunities, youth corps, and then some community-led programming kind of in partnership with the city. So that could be parent leadership groups, youth advisory boards, kind of finding different ways to connect the community to what we're doing in kind of an ongoing, sustainable way. So that we're not just checking in with folks once, putting a bunch of programming together, and then hoping that works forever. So those are some of the organizations and agencies I mentioned before. And this is funded currently by the Nature Everywhere grant, which we got awarded a little under a year ago. And that funding lasts for 2024 and through most of 2025. We have $40,000 for 2024, and I'll get into what we're using that for, but most of it right now is community assessment. 2025 we'll get another between probably 50 and 100K, and this is not just for the city, this is for all of these collaborators to share and use as a group. So we know kind of what this is going to look like because it's been done before. The city of Lafayette did it. I think last time I was here, maybe 2 times ago, I went over kind of in detail what that looked like. Just a quick slide to remind you. So Lafayette had 20 plus collaborating organizations. They were looking at about $1 million in programming per year funded by GoCo, which is similar to what we anticipate. They had 1,500 unique participants annually, and about 80% of that was low income and students of color, and we're looking to do something similar here. Theirs, similar to ours, theirs was a 5-year, $10 million collective impact project, again funded by GoCo. That's what we're aiming for here. We haven't applied yet, but we're in conversation with GoCo, and they've all but guaranteed that if we apply, they plan to fund this for us. So yeah, the goal was to connect underserved youth in Lafayette to nature and outdoor activities. Same here. And yeah, it's designed for, or we'll be designing it for pre-K to high school. So really the full range, all ages for youth and families. Younger kids will be focused more on like backyard, just getting outside and getting comfortable outside. Later elementary school, middle school, more education, stewardship, that kind of thing. And then once you get into high school, more of those leadership opportunities in the outdoors. And Lafayette did capital construction projects, ensure all Lafayette youth live within a safe 10-minute walk of a nature space. We're pretty darn close to that anyways in Longmont, so I don't anticipate that we're going to be doing much capital construction, if any, here, but if we learn that there's a need for something like that, that's something that we can throw into our application with GoCo and try to get funding for. This is just an overview. I'm not really the right person to tell the story of the Latino community in Longmont, but I want to give you kind of an idea of why it's so important that we focus on some of these lesser served communities in Longmont, other than the fact that we just want to serve everyone equitably here. Early 1900s, economic growth relied really heavily on agriculture in Longmont, and that really, the work was done by the Hispanic community, who migrated here from mostly within the U.S., but some also from Mexico. But folks came from New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and worked in the sugar beet fields here in Longmont. Historically, the Hispanic neighborhoods were north and east Longmont, kind of on the edges of town. Those neighborhoods are no longer necessarily on the edges of town, but they're still in many cases majority Hispanic, not all of them, but many of them. And in many or even most cases, they tend to be our sort of lower income neighborhoods with higher economic vulnerability. Did Tatiana present at the last meeting on her?
Well, it's a couple of
Okay, cool. So you've seen some of the mapping that she's done, and I'll explain how we're doing this sort of in partnership with the mapping that she's working on. But yeah, you can see some of these trends still today in neighborhoods. Economic vulnerability overlaps really, really closely with the Hispanic populations in neighborhoods. Throughout Colorado, and including Longmont, Latino families have faced considerable racism, exclusion, hardship since arriving here. And today, still 25% of Longmont's total population is Spanish-speaking. And this is part of a larger effort throughout the city to kind of acknowledge the past mistakes over the past 100+ years at the city, rebuild that trust, and try to build those relationships so that we can really, with genuine intent, equitably serve, include, and celebrate the Latino community here in Longmont. The Community and Neighborhood Resource Team here at Longmont, so that's led by Carmen, who I know has presented to you guys before. They are amazing. They've already built relationships with so many communities, some of the lesser served communities specifically, throughout Longmont, historically lesser served. And so we're working really closely with Carmen in particular, but with that whole team to utilize those relationships they already have built and build those relationships out further with some of the work we're doing. And we're also working with, again, those external organizations throughout Longmont that also serve and have relationships with those communities. Because it's not something that our department or me in particular, we don't have the ability to just go out and create all these relationships. We really need help. So community assessment, this is the stage we're in right now. We, as like a larger group, so including all of those external organizations, including me, including some folks from REC, we all got together and designed this community assessment strategy. And now, like as of a week ago, we're just starting to see that roll out. So we're in the very, very early stages of it. It will continue throughout the summer and into the fall. What that looks like is for elementary school age kids, we're doing nature play drawing activities and interviews. So traditional surveys, the same survey we have for adults obviously doesn't work well for all ages. So we're engaging kids of different ages in different ways to try to get their feedback on what barriers they have to the outdoors, as well as what they'd like to see in the outdoors and what kind of programming they would be interested in. Middle school, they have some sort of photo project, as well as high school. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, but kids are taking photos of what they'd like to see and what prevents them from getting in the outdoors and putting together some sort of project that we're then reviewing. And then we're also conducting interviews, and for high schoolers, we're doing focus groups as well. Family and adults, we're doing focus groups and surveying. And then for the broader community, we have a survey put together, which I'll show you in a minute. And we have 3 hired bilingual interns, 1 or 2 of whom have participated in Lafayette's Nature Kids program, so they have a really good understanding of what this would look like eventually. And then 1 community leader who's a woman in her 40s who speaks Spanish and is a kind of a cultural broker, community leader in one of our more heavily Spanish-speaking neighborhoods. So yeah, door to door, our community-based organizations that are involved in this are also doing some surveying through their folks, and then we're also sending our survey out by email. Facilitation is done by a trained bilingual facilitator, and the interns who will be working with kids and adults on all of this. So right now we're doing some private pilot programming. We've done some youth and family volunteer projects just this morning, and tomorrow I was out with a group of like a dozen or so kids, and we did a bilingual education / pollinator gardening event. And we have a handful more of those planned throughout the year. So more educational nature play opportunities. Thorn is doing a summer camp at Rogers Grove, 3 sections of summer camp. which I think 80% of the kids who are attending have sponsored, their fees are sponsored so that they pay very little or nothing. And then free overnight camp at Calwood, which is up in the mountains, so that's a cool experience for a lot of kids. And then participation in Children, Youth, and Families Annual Youth Summit, as well as working with the Youth Center pretty frequently. The assessments that we're focusing, our assessment on, again, Spanish-speaking and low-income communities. And this is, again, funded with the 40K from Nature Everywhere right now. I can show you guys the survey. It's pretty cool. Well, maybe. We'll see. Oh gosh, it's showing up on this screen.
Just get out of your presentation, I think. Because I need to get to the screen that it opened for you.
Yes, no, this one else is not here. Yeah, I don't have a mouse again. I don't have a
It's on the TV.
It's
So
on the T, you gotta slide it
Oh,
over.
okay, cool.
one of the 4
My mouse is
directions
there.
from the TV.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just move to one of the 4 sides, it'll go to your screen.
Yay, let's go. If not, I can read some of this to you.
Yeah, if you just slide it, yeah, I think.
I don't understand, you keep saying that, but I'm not
It's
following
it's
you.
the
So
two
it's about here.
screens.
I know. but-
Let's go here. Let's see, where is it here? Is it either below or above?
So it doesn't, like, why doesn't that button work? That's all her things that are open.
It's on this side. You're not crazy. What you can do too
I'm
is
not crazy.
this.
Hey, nice. That's great. Thank you.
So,
I have no idea what we do.
If you press the Windows key and use the arrows, you can like move windows around with a mouse.
Okay, cool.
As long as it's like
Good
this.
to know. All right, cool. So this is the survey. We also have it in Spanish, and it's not just Google translated. This is actually translated by a paid translator. These questions we came up with as a group, and then we also had someone who's done these surveys before with Lafayette. She also helped design this. It's 20 questions, and every question there's a strong reason we ask it, and there's something that we want out of those answers. So you can see, we want to know why people get outside. Is it health? Is it a sense of community? What is it that gets people outside? How do they access the outdoors? How would they like to access the outdoors? Things that prevent you from spending time outside. Most of these offer the opportunity to click on several answers, which is cool. And we also, I should add, Tatiana also worked with us in designing this survey, where she had input into these questions and these answers. So these are questions that she is deemed helpful for her work as well. So this is what the survey looks like. At the end, we have some questions on what language do you speak, trying to get an idea of who's taking the survey, and most importantly, at least Tatiana would say most importantly, and I would too, we have a map so that people can click exactly, if not exactly where they live, certainly like pretty darn close to where they live, so that we have an idea of what kind of answers we're getting from different neighborhoods, which will be really helpful, especially when it comes to like barriers to access and amenities that people would like to see in parks. We'll be able to tell where those answers are coming from, which is great. So this survey is going out now. We have a few results so far, not a ton. A month from now will be absolutely smattered with dots, but you can see we've got some answers already. And these, of course, can be thrown into an Excel sheet.
How's the survey going out?
A number of ways. Email and then also like door to door on iPads. And then we also have iPads at events that we're holding and focus groups and all of that. So
It's not just available online.
it's not currently just available like on the website or anything. We're trying to do sort of targeted surveying right now because we want to make sure that the results we're getting are hitting the neighborhoods and the people that we want to hit, at least at the start. We'll see if this fall, if we want to open it up and just put it on Facebook or something and get a whole bunch of results. But we want to make sure that first we're hitting the people we really want to hit. So that's the gist. That's where we're at right now. Once we have these results in the fall, we, as part of the funding from Nature Everywhere, we have funding for someone to evaluate and analyze all of this. And then we're also, so City of Longmont, our GIS team put this survey and this mapping piece together. So it should be really easy for the city to take all of this data and analyze it and use it for whatever we want as well. So yeah, that's where we're at right now, along with the pilot programming, which we'll run through fall and summer. And once we have those answers, and once we've done some evaluation this winter, we will be designing next season in accordance with some of those ideas and some of the responses we get. And then that following fall/winter, that's when we apply for the big money window, which again, we're planning on getting. But we'll be able to apply with very specific things in mind based on this community assessment.
Taylor, I have an idea for you as far as surveys. Back to school is in 30 seconds.
Totally.
Because that's what I was just working on. The back to school, when people come and get their books and when people come and do their registration, that's a great time, especially to be at some of the schools where there are underserved communities. I've worked at one and I know like lots of people come to that back to school when you get your books and registration. Yeah. So if you could hit Indian Peaks and Timberline and Skyline and actually Niwot too, like people think of Niwot, but Niwot is very diverse and has a lot of lot monsters.
Right, that's a really good idea. I'll definitely pass that along. Yeah. That's a great idea. Any other questions?
Is there any thought to doing an in-school program?
Yes, Lafayette did, as you know. I don't currently have much of a relationship with, well, the city as a whole doesn't have a strong relationship with Longmont, St. Vrain Valley School District as a whole. Right now, anytime we work with the school district, it tends to be with individual schools. So that's a piece that, assuming there's a need for that, which I think people will be asking for that, we have to figure that piece out. Because we'll want to do it I think doing it kind of piecemeal school by school is probably not the most efficient or effective way to go about that. So we'd have to have some bigger conversations with the school district.
Yeah, we just have so many schools here compared to Lafayette that it's a little different, but it is the way to be equitable.
Definitely.
Because a lot of kids don't have parents that will sign them up for anything.
Right.
Period. And being able to reach those kids is, for those of you who know, I'm the person who does the in school for Nature Kids Lafayette. I do all of that and so being able to reach those kids has been really, really powerful. Changed a lot of kids' lives completely. Kids that go to school now that didn't go to school. And, it's pretty cool. So if we can do that, it would be great.
I agree.
Yeah, because these aren't kids whose parents will ever sign them up for a Thorn.
Right. And and as accessible as you try to make out of school programming, it's just not accessible to a lot of folks. Parents work evenings, parents work weekends. Kids don't have a way to get places.
And then also, if you have it with a mix of kids that do have access, and that it actually increases the success, just like having a special education program is you don't just put kids that don't have any access to nature with other kids that don't, because then everybody's a little lost in you know, they don't have their peer role models, but if you have different people, I found the most successful classes have some kids that go skiing every weekend and some kids that have literally never gotten to go to the park by themselves because their parents were scared, so, yeah. So let me know if there's gonna be schools in Longmont.
Okay, yeah, I will. I'll keep you on all of this.
That's great to hear this update.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's coming along really well.
Totally. I'll come back once we have survey results. I'll update you guys again before we start next season.
Very exciting.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, and you should hit up Casa de la Esperanza as
Yes, they're involved already, so we're good.
Right, our second new business item is discussing our council's motion to draft the open space tax extension ballot language as accompanies us.
My computer's so old, I don't even think I can see mine.
Okay. So we got direction from council 2 weeks ago to bring open space tax language back for review. And so that's gonna be happening on the 23rd. But the lead up to that, you know, everything is due long before that. So we're in the process of working on that, and we've also developed a PowerPoint, which is a little drafty, but we're debuting with you tonight. And that's because a lot of discussion happened during council on the 25th of June. And so we heard those questions and we're trying to address them here with this as kind of the lead into that language, the draft language that we want to present to council. So we're not going to be looking at language tonight, we're just going to be looking at the presentation because the language still needs to go through attorney and all of that. So it's not ready, but this is ready-ish. So always talking about open space, it's critical that we start with our land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the First Peoples have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken, and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. So, coming back to you after hearing what various council members were bringing up, these were kind of the questions that we boiled it down to, and that's what this presentation is about. How does Longmont balance open space acquisition with housing, primary employment, and development? This was a lot of the stuff that Councilor Martin was talking about. And then how do we evaluate open spaces when considering an acquisition? Also, Councilor Martin was discussing this. Can we maintain the open spaces we own and those we may acquire in the future? What is the cost to maintain open space? And why should we extend the open space tax now? What does long-term stewardship look like? So if we think about the progression of our very young open space program that started in the year 2000, this graphic maybe needs a little work, but hopefully you can see that it's a little bit divided into thirds. So that at the very beginning, so throughout, you see the blue below, throughout there's operations and maintenance. But when the program began in the year 2000, a lot of purple. We were really focusing on acquisitions, and then you get into this middle third where we are now. There's a lot of maintenance going on, less acquisition, and starting on restoration is where we're going. And then you can see the final third, the long-term stewardship of our open spaces. You're gonna see a lot of, restoration and stewardship is gonna take over. There'll still be perturbations of acquisitions and open space, and operations and maintenance will continue. Does that make sense?
Is the idea the chart would be like relative funding or expenditures?
Yeah,
Something like that?
you can think of it that way, because the open space tax funds all three of these things, and if you think of the progression and how the program transitions over time, lots of acquisitions, always maintenance, but then a little more restoration coming in, and then a lot more restoration coming in while the acquisitions are falling off. Does that make sense?
Do you have that accounting historically? Like, do you know how much was spent in 2004 on acquisition versus stewardship, or?
I mean, it's not, there's no table that says that, but
It's a
yes.
dimensional chart, not a
yes,
actual
if
chart.
we had an intern that could put all our files together, we could get that, yeah. But yes,
I'm just gonna note too, and we talked about this a little bit on the field trip, that there is a relationship between maintenance and the restoration piece, in that the restoration in some cases can reduce that need for sort of investment in
Yes.
maintenance over time.
I know, and I tried to capture it a little, you see how I spread it out a little, but this is, I
think
took
that's
drafted.
fine, but you should pull it, I'm just suggesting that you pull that out, that, when you do things like prescribed pruning or, getting rid of invasives and replacing with natives, over time, ideally it becomes more self-sustaining.
Yeah.
And your maintenance costs go down.
You're right, so
It's just an
it
important.
could show better in this graphic, in that final third, and then talking about that here. So we talk about this a little bit, but that's a good note.
Or maybe even a picture of how something came into the system and now with maintenance and restoration and stewardship.
We will get there. I have acquisition circled because I'm trying to focus here on just the acquisition piece. But this graphic you're gonna see a few times throughout the presentation, which is, okay, so where was I? The first question, how does Longmont balance open space acquisition with housing, primary employment, and development? So we look at our Envision Longmont comprehensive plan, which the city adopted in 2016, and we look at our open space master plan, which the city adopted in 2018. And when we look at Envision Longmont, let's see, the comprehensive plan, in there you see that we have growth framework objectives. So that's getting at housing, primary employment, and development. And then we also think about that in the context of future land use planning. So we speak about our municipal service areas, the Longmont planning area, and then the greater St. Vrain Valley planning area. So that's what we see in Envision Longmont around this question. And then if you look in the open space master plan, well we're not ready for that. That's question 2. So if you, I want to show you this. So if you think about the growth framework, it's the getting at housing and primary employment and development. The Longmont planning area is this yellow line. So that planning largely happens inside the planning area, whereas open space acquisition largely happens outside that planning area. There are exceptions. We do have nature areas within the Longmont planning area, and those are areas that were not necessarily purchased with open space funds, but are operated and maintained with open space funds and are used as open spaces, they're not parks, they're open spaces inside the planning area. So, and then getting to question 2, how do we evaluate open spaces when considering an acquisition? We look at our...
Before you jump to question 2, if you can go back to question 1.
Yeah.
So I actually think, and we've discussed this here, I might ask the reverse question, which is how does the city evaluate the need for open space in natural areas when considering permitting for housing and development? So, I mean, this reflects a particular bias in this question, but I think it's important that it's also important that the city think about open space and natural areas in the way that they do that kind of permitting and thinking about housing, because you're not gonna get the quality of life they aim for.
I do like that idea, I like that concept, and I feel like it's a little bit done here when we look at the growth goals in Envision Longmont here, but then you see this context of the future land use plan, and it's kind of laid out in this context, so I need to think about, the bias in that question.
I think both of those
and how-
questions are important, like how are we thinking about
Yeah,
housing and employment needs in regard to open space, but also how are we making sure that we're thinking about open space and natural area needs in these, multitude of land use decisions that are happening.
What brought people to Longmont
Yes.
was not,
Right,
streets and parking lots.
Right.
that's great,
right, exactly.
that's really good, yeah, thank you.
I like that personally. I was concerned about that, about the
The phrasing,
phrasing.
yeah, and how it's phrased can really inform where the discussion goes. So if we move on to the second question, how do we evaluate open spaces when considering an acquisition? That was discussed, and we have a very clear, discussion around this in our open space master plan. So some of the things that we heard during the discussion is, our open space division always brings acquisitions before city council so that there is, they have the final say. It's not staff, it's city council. So there's that, but then also in the open space management plan, how do we start? We have a description of that in the open space management plan here, talking about the filters. So what are we doing first? We're looking at the parcel in consideration, and we're looking at some of these things here in this broadest filter. We're using mapping tools. We're looking at the criteria that are laid out in our ordinance. And then we get a little finer here in tier 2, willingness of the seller, things like that, and then the finest filter, tier 3. So this will get a little bit more developed for the city council presentation, but it's
In tier
This
2,
is how we're getting
when
at
you're
it.
talking about that ecosystem services, you might connect it to climate adaptation, particularly in communities that are, like the ones Taylor was talking about, that are, more impacted, have less tree cover, maybe more, subject to flood risk. That's another value of open space in natural areas.
yeah.
But
we
I think you
talk
could,
about-
you
I like
talked
that.
about it, but just pulling that out and the connection to climate and climate-related risk to communities. And the role that open space and natural areas can play. It's just a frame, you have that information in there.
This is a presentation that's going to city council, if I understand right. Am I understanding right? This is we're previewing something that's going to go to city council to educate city council about all this, correct?
Correct, we've been in front of city council twice in June we brought you a presentation, it was way back in September 2023, and then Susie Hilago-Faring asked for council to have an open space presentation. So we did that and talked about our past, present, and future and the program, just to really, with the new members of council and stuff, to really kind of ground them in that basis. And then we did the open space tour with PRAB and city council for a second time this summer. And then there's been a lot of public and residents coming and talking about the open space tax. And again, they came on the 25th, and after that discussion, council asked staff to work on this and to come back on the 23rd and give them draft language. And that's at that time they'll vote to recommend it be on the November ballot.
So this is to educate city council, but also to educate all the people that are concerned enough to be there.
And to address all the discussion that happened along with the motion that council made. There were 2 motions made. One to refer it to the ballot, but also Councilor Martin directed staff to come back and address some of the things that she was talking about, and we were trying to capture it here in some of the first 2 questions here.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the first.
Well,
I
I see question 2. So I was thinking about this because I was trying to think of our audience. Is that often that, like, as smart as our city council people are, all this language is tough. Like, it's tough, and it's tough to look at, like, what's the filter. But I feel like an example of one of the things that we just using an example, because that's how people learn. And so we're trying to teach city council and then anybody who's there. So if we could have an example of the filter, like just a real quick less than 1 minute example of
Sure, the filter, I see.
this like the one that's like by Circle K, this barn. It was about to be donated to us. So like the filter we went, what service, like just go like maybe a 30-second, then we checked out to see if this, and then we checked out to see that. That's how we filter. And just giving an example like that will really help people internalize what this says and maybe feel it.
Well, I think there's something else driving Councilor Martin's discussion on this. I'm not convinced that all of council is against this concept or adding stuff or focusing on housing in this particular situation. I think that was her thinking, probably more prompted by organizations like Launch that she's pretty actively involved with and others like that. So that's where I felt like some of this was coming from, not necessarily all of council feeling that way. I think most of council is pretty understanding of the necessity, the importance, and the value to the community of open space.
Yeah, really this presentation was just addressing some specific questions that came from council.
And that's good. But I was just thinking like maybe, because then if you make it really plain to people like Councilor Martin, but with everybody else, then they can't deny it. Like that, now they know we do have a filter. We don't just be like, we don't take it really. We have an example, things like that. Really just make it really plainer than plain.
Make the argument.
So if I don't mind, I was going to say this at the end, but I think sometimes Jeff and I talk about, how this board feels like they're adding value. This group really had a week to turn around getting stuff ready for council. They have a little more time to get the PowerPoint ready because they show up with that, but getting stuff ready is going to be tough. And we really are counting on this group to do exactly what you're doing. So to your question, this really is helping us hone this and get it ready so it can answer council's questions. And to your point, Paige, and both of you, Aaron, it's an opportunity. Anytime we get a chance to get up there and talk about our program and help others understand too, it's great. So one, I want to thank Jim and Danielle for being up here, being vulnerable with a very rough presentation. They just walked in the office.
It doesn't look good enough to me. It looks great.
They were just, as I left the office, working on it and willing to put it in front of you all to help them with it.
Well, I'm like doing this as collaborative, like let's say we were teaching a class together and like, okay, let's give an example, right? Like that's because I'm coming from an educator's viewpoint because we're trying to educate them on why open space is important, darn it.
Well, this helps me as a council member to reiterate what this board's interested in, what we want, and not a whole lot of, I don't want this to go off the rails. That's my biggest concern. I'm a little concerned that it could. And not due to the fact that you haven't prepared plenty for this, and that our legal department won't have the ballot language created. I'm just afraid that somehow somebody will try to, without the examples that Commissioner Aaron Engel was talking about, that we could very well go off the rails, and that's concerning.
Yeah, that's the way.
It's nice to have this room to help us hear what those rails are, and we really appreciate that. And I think it's one of the things that again, I think this group really, lessons learned from some of the rec stuff, we're looking at that too and seeing where these things have gone off rails. We're trying to get in front of that a little bit too. It's just a lot, but I do think that we have the right people looking at it.
And I think as much as you can dissuade the conversation from pitting like housing and employment against open space and natural areas, because they're complementary. They're not things that are opposed. It shouldn't be either or. It's not like we would want like wall-to-wall housing with no natural areas, or just natural areas with no place to live. I mean, I might want that, but
False choice that you don't, you can't have both, so.
You know,
You can
yeah,
have
a
both.
multi-family yurt commune, that would be great, but yeah.
So I think, like steering away from the idea that those, we have to choose. It's more about how do we make the
And
appropriate
I think we want to make sure
balance.
that the council members who raise those questions know that they were heard though too.
Right.
So I think framing it a little bit differently is a great way.
Scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset.
Okay, so what, I was getting you through questions 1 and 2, we kind of got there. I'm gonna hand it off to Jim, and he's gonna do the maintenance and long-term stewardship pieces.
Yeah, so if you don't know me, I'm Jim Crick, Ecosystem Manager for City of Longmont, so kind of Danielle's counterpart. So Danielle's really active in acquiring our open spaces and helping build that portfolio, and then gets handed off to my work group to kind of perform this maintenance and eventually look at the restoration. If you want to see the next slide. So yeah, to talk about that third question of do we have enough funding currently for what our current inventory is to do this maintenance, and what does it look like if we add more open space land to our portfolio? Would we have the ability to manage those properties as well? So from that past diagram, there's that continuation of maintenance, and so that's just always ongoing. And really, that comes down to mostly like noxious weed control, wildlife management, kind of the basic stuff. I kind of think of it as, when we acquire properties, as beautiful as much of our open space is and our nature areas are, if you really get down to the nitty gritty of their ecological function, pretty much all of them are in pretty degraded state. It's just the nature of acquiring properties that were, for lack of a better term, abused by past landowners. Whether it's, they were just overgrazed, or who knows, they were mined, whatever. Neglected, yeah, that's good too. So they all come into our inventory with needing some help. If you want to think of it as, each property coming in as like a patient in a hospital, they have some level of ailment that needs to be worked on. And so we're really in this maintenance phase before we get into long-term stewardship and restoration. Is really just trying to stabilize those properties, if you want to think of it like a patient. To get to that question of do we have enough money, funding to be able to do this maintenance, it's honestly a really difficult question to answer. Because like with each patient, they have a different level of ailment and how much work is it going to take. So basically the best way that I could come up with a cost estimate for like a per acre of maintenance for our properties was to really take our existing O&M budget and kind of divide that by the acres that we manage for natural properties. I do want to make that distinguishing characteristic between natural lands and our ag properties. So we do have open spaces that are agricultural production and some that are for more like wildlife habitat. Our ag properties, really most of that maintenance is a requirement of those ag tenants, so there's very little O&M that we put towards ag properties. So I really wanted to focus on our natural lands maintenance where most of our O&M goes to. So dividing that out, we come up with about $340 per acre for maintaining our natural land type properties, so our open spaces, nature areas, and recreating corridors. So to then get into that question of, are we going to have enough money to manage any more acquisitions? So if you're looking at, we add a 100-acre property that's about $34,000 per acre, or total based off our per acre price that it would cost to do our continuing maintenance. That $34,000, if you want to put that in perspective, that's about, I wanted to say that was roughly 3% of our overall O&M budget. It's like $1.1 million that we spend annually And then if you want to look at that compared to what our open space fund brings in from our sales and use tax, which is roughly about $6 million a year, we're looking at less than about half of 1% of our overall revenue that comes in every year from our open space tax. So I would say that we would have enough money to continue to expand our program and also maintain what we currently have. And then as far as how many FTEs that we have for our current properties, we have roughly 6.75 FTE. So we'd have to add, maybe 300 acres of open space where I may be looking to request another technician to help do control and wildlife management. And then going into that last question, why are we looking to extend the open space tax now when we have 10 years left before it sunsets? And really that gets into, if you want to go to the next slide, into this long-term restoration and stewardship. For those that were on the open space tour, we kind of mentioned that this planning for restoration and stewardship and actually implementing restoration and stewardship is a long-term commitment. Want to go to the next slide? So I kind of put together a mock restoration plan. I'm not saying this is what needs to be done at Golden Ponds, but this is kind of an example of what could be done for restoration. So long-term restoration is really continuing with noxious weed control, actually going in and seeding and trying to replace non-native vegetation with native vegetation, which, like Paige, you were mentioning. Once we get that going, that really helps with long-term, reducing that long-term maintenance. Because the best defense against noxious weeds are having really well-developed perennial native vegetation. And then we get into potential stream restoration on the same frame, for example, and then trying to implement prescribed fires and grazing, which are really critical for natural systems as they have natural disturbance like grazing and fire that these ecosystems evolved with to maintain those systems in perpetuity. So go to the next one. So with
Can
that,
we vote on Golden Ponds first?
what's that? So with that, I tried to put together some sort of timeline for a restoration plan like we were talking about for Golden Ponds and some cost to that. So you can see for all these different phases of restoration plan, we're easily getting out into 20 years. And really, restoration, if you include that monitoring, which is really important for making sure that the actions that we take are actually working. If we're not monitoring, we don't know if what we're doing is actually making any positive impact or not. So if you really want to include monitoring, you can say restoration happens in perpetuity. Yep. So that's kind of how we do our adaptive management to not get too off on a different tangent. But really, to manage a property you really determine what needs to be done, implement a plan, and then you monitor to see if that's working. If it's not working, then you go back to square one. So with that, this kind of phased plan is just everything goes absolutely perfectly, which doesn't happen all the time. Particularly like say for seeding, if we don't get enough rain for seeding, it's not going to take, and then we have to go right back to square one and try to seed again and continue the weed control. So this is if everything happens perfectly, which rarely happens. So you can see that having that long-term stability of knowing that our open space funding is going to be here for long haul, then we can really start getting into this planning and figuring out what each of our properties really needs to be, what needs to happen on each property long-term to get them in that kind of self-sustaining ecosystem management. So kind of looking at what some of those costs are, we get into another reason why having that funding in perpetuity and having that stability is really important is that restoration is not cheap. You can see a cost estimate here of $2.3 million to implement this mock plan. A lot of that is from stream restoration, but overall I think that still gets to kind of a cost estimate from our open space tour of that $7,000 to $10,000 per acre for long-term restoration needs. So it's definitely not inexpensive. But that goes back to that graphic that we keep showing, is that we have to balance acquisitions, restoration needs, maintenance. So there's always that give and take really between what Danielle and I are planning long-term for our program of It may be Danielle realizes, we don't have enough water for this property. We need to try to get money together to acquire more water. So at that point, we can discuss and say, okay, let's take a step back for maybe doing some restoration this year on the property and try to fit in that water acquisition. So we can always balance that and adjust where we're spending that money. And having that flexibility, I think, is really important, particularly for land acquisitions, because you never know when a property seller is going to be willing to sell the property that we may be targeting. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen 10 years from now. We really have no idea. So having that flexibility is really important, and not trying to say that only a certain amount of the open space tax should be used for this, acquisition or for restoration. That really makes it difficult to long-term plan too. One thing that we do need to add a slide for in the discussion that has been discussed previously with residents that have brought it up to council is that besides our ability to maintain open space properties and nature areas, the city does have a pretty large inventory of property that was not acquired with open space dollars, such as Button Rock Preserve, that was acquired with water funds, that because of the way the tax language is written for our open space tax, we cannot use our open space tax dollars to manage and do a maintenance or restoration of that Button Rock, which I would argue is a pretty important property. It's roughly 3,000 acres, so almost double our open space inventory. That's where 2/3 of Longmont's drinking water comes from. It has pretty significant wildlife habitat. Danielle completed the Button Rock Management Plan, was that 2 years ago now? Seems like just yesterday. But that identified a whole slew of management needs up there for natural resource management that honestly hasn't been done up there. Rightfully so, our water resources department, their main focus is on quality and quantity of water delivery. Doing wildlife surveys and managing elk range up at Button Rock, it's not really part of their core mission. So that's something that we are looking into in drafting the ballot language for open space tax, is crafting it in a way. We don't want to open a Pandora's box and can of worms where everybody's going to try to use open space tax for whatever they think they can, but really try to craft that language specifically to be able to do the necessary land management on not just open space properties, but properties like Button Rock that are really important for the community, but also just the ecosystem in general.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you go back to the initial budget slide where you started talking about the numbers? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just encourage, I know you're sort of working through the logic in your mind, but when you present it, I would just make it as simple and clear as possible. Just work out whatever makes the most sense to you to say and just share that, because I think people might get lost, and I'm sort of looking at I think people
that's really my biggest concern.
might get lost in some of the background detail you would, and so I would just say, based on our current costs, whatever logic makes most sense to you, I would just make it really simple and kind of straightforward and stated. And maybe you were going to do that because I know you were just kind of sharing your thinking with us. So that's just one thing. And then on the graph, I wonder, I feel like the visual is not necessarily communicating. I wonder if you could just do, I don't know if you could do it by year over the start of the program, but if you just did colored bars for each year, so you could see the relative, purple, blue, green. Maybe there's a lot of purple initially, and then it transitions to blue, green versus all, for each year. I don't know. I would just work with
I hear work on it. It's not
it's not
1,000 words right now.
It is already our third iteration of
because
this
I keep
graphic.
thinking are the down arrows expenditures or a balance sheet?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing, on where you were doing the example of the long-term restoration piece, I liked the sort of picture, and I wonder if you could talk to it more. Again, I worry about the detail in your graph on the next slide.
Imagine you're a rec person, Jen.
This.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this might become overwhelming and feel like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to have this for every open space, and that feels, so I wonder if you could stick to the picture and just talk about what that, like, just use that image and talk more about what the restoration might look like over time. Like, we might start with the weeds and, you know, getting to the native plants, and here's the benefits, and then we might work on the stream restoration. Just because I feel like this would be
Well, it's
scary
somebody's
to some people.
criticism might be, are those dollars constant? When we know that they're not, and that it's likely some of those things, the grazing costs could go up, and
I mean,
everything will
this is
probably
interesting
go up.
for us, but I think just for general,
Yeah, I think this shows really well the interplay between the maintenance and the restoration. I would just show this graph with no numbers. Just timeline. And I think it's just, people just see numbers and get distracted by the large numbers.
Sure.
yeah.
So what you're showing really is the interplay of like momentary events that have long-term, multi-year investments required. The dollar amount isn't important. It could be 10 of that or 10 times that in the property. It's more that like this is how things work.
The
As we get numbers, people start doing the math for you too. They start-
Right.
Yeah,
And they're gonna go,
saying, I can't read that, can you give me a copy? And you're like, no, I can't. I really like that example, the golden ponds. That's exactly what I was talking about with that. It's just having an example for somebody to think it through. Like you could even just use, like when we thought of acquiring golden ponds, this was the filter it went through. And then we're gonna keep using this golden ponds example. And then I like what Paige said about like tying it in, all these things, how making sure that you tie them in, because like grazing, well, that tells you that we need more grazing is something that tells you we need more open space, because if we don't have a wildlife corridor, we don't have the natural grazing of the ungulates, right? And if we have a good wildlife corridor, then we have natural grazing, which is supposed to be there in the first place, which is why we have to keep restoring things, is because we have damaged the ecosystem. I worry that if we talk about it as a hospital patient, that critical people will say, why are we buying somebody who's so sick? So if we talk about just like annual, like you need to go to the doctor and sometimes, like all of us need to take care of ourselves kind of thing. You need to go to the doctor and sometimes you find out, whoa, it's going to cost a little more money this year because of something. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
then we're acquiring like you and me, not like adopting the sick puppy that, you know, needs 4 new hips and
But I think one of the things that
removal.
you mentioned was that, you know, that we have, when we acquire them, the shape they're in. And unfortunately, with our open space program, a lot of times we are taking on properties that Danielle used to neglected, but they were former gravel mines, or former, or I mean, these are the opportunities we get sometimes to make these things. They were farms that, you know, had been in town for a long time, and now they're at the end of that. So I try to bridge that too. That, you know, it takes a lot when we get these. They do need some TLC up front. Then they need that long-term care, and then you need the restoration. Another piece I wanted to throw out there too for this group, and Danielle, I think, as Jim's talking about Golden Pond, some more people, because you talked about the split work, Danielle is writing operating plans for all these properties and going through and saying, here's the condition we got again, and here's where we want it to go. So Golden Ponds is like a snapshot of all these properties and how we're trying to write these master plans to say where we want them to be.
That's what I think, is the snapshot is really good. Just say, for example, Golden Ponds, and then it just simplifies it. Yeah, it's a great example. Everybody loves Golden Ponds. We all see the value in it. You know, but then I keep having questions like, why do we allow people to mine our land and leave it crappy? Like, I like everything. That's like, I don't know. That's what you just pose that right back to city council. Let me be there, and I could just be like, if there wasn't Robert's Rules of Order, I'd be like, yeah, you let them build the Walmart, but you know the Walmart's going to go out of business, and then we're going to have to deal with that parking lot. Why did you let that happen? Wait, you're letting it happen all the time, like so.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the gravel mine, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over. Particularly even the reclamation plan, that's with the state, and so we try to have some input as we go along and try to make improvements to that. But yeah, you know, a lot of properties we acquired that those gravel mining rights were already acquired before the city got the property and already had a reclamation plan. So we try to do our best in those situations, but a lot of times it's already been decided.
On slide 8 though, you then said at the end of it, and we need to probably give an example, that if you were to bring on a certain number, another so many acres, what that would look like. You said quickly, that'd be another employee, or that'd be another 3 employees. Just that probably needs to be maybe shown, or at least if you're going to say it, either don't say it, or if you're going to say it, then show the information so people understand that when you bring on an extra 100 acres or something like this, or 50 acres, that equates to another employee and everything.
Okay.
And also you can equate it a whole different way, is that instead of it costs us employee, is that we get to give employment to another employee.
Yeah,
Gets a
it's an
a
employee
good job.
generator. That's
No,
it's
because
good.
that's what Councilman Martin keeps saying is like, we need more jobs. Well, I'm not sure, because I'm not sure if we do, but I might beg to disagree. But let's hit where they where they're like, we get to give somebody a job.
It's an employee generating situation, and
doing something that they would probably love, because this is a great job.
yeah.
Yeah.
So is there I was just looking at this, CSU did this ROI analysis on the Colorado's easement tax credit program. And, what is the benefit to Colorado taxpayers of this tax credit we have for conservation easements? And it's huge. I don't know if there's anything similar for, I can share the most recent study with you. I don't know if it would be relevant to city open space, but there is an ROI in terms of the benefit to community of acquisition of open spaces and conservation.
Well, it's there's
We
even
did
some.
get into this a little bit. We did try and get after this, when we gave our past, present, and future presentation, just giving an overview of the program, and
It's not the honest piece.
it might be worth bringing it. Just
I'll send this to you if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, well, and even at the second to last council presentation, when you gave that, prior to your presentation, there was the Longmont developments. I forget what group they're called, but they provide a couple of stats, actually 2 different groups provide stats of, I forget what it was, almost 8% of the people that visit Longmont said they visit Longmont because of the outdoors, something, yeah.
I put that in here. That's in here somewhere. Or maybe I just said it.
Yeah, I think the maid said something about it. I would almost go back to that meeting and look at what both those folks, Aaron Fawcett and
Yeah, we can look at the recording.
yeah, and just quote them. It's public record.
Yeah, I thought it was two pretty powerful stats that came out of it.
Yeah.
One is Visit Longmont, and one is the Economic Development Authority.
Okay, well that's our presentation in the works.
Thanks for
That's
letting us
good.
give you all this feedback.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing with us and letting us give you feedback.
Yeah.
That's just so nice.
Well, I wanted to hear, I didn't hear much feedback about that, the discussion about the expanded use of open space tax for places like Red Rock. I don't know if anybody had any thoughts about that or concerns or.
To me is for sure, that is open space. Just because you don't buy it, just because I, got something from Buy Nothing doesn't mean I don't have to wash the skirt that I got from Buy Nothing, right? You still gotta take care of stuff just because I didn't go to Kohl's.
I would say less of expanding and more of aligning the availability of funds to the open spaces that are eventually the city. I think there's a distinction between lowercase o open space and uppercase open space that only matters to people who are in this meeting and in this, in the city. That the public, I was going to make this point earlier, like you mentioned, the public wanted to come to Longmont for access to open space. A lot of that's not actually capital O open space they're accessing, right? It's city parks and amenities or places that are acquired one way and held in a different way. And those distinctions are important at a planning level and at a like policy and acquisition level, but in public, it's really simple. It's like we want to better maintain the access to the outdoors that we all have. And Button Rock is not different from an agricultural lease other than how you describe it.
Right.
And so I think it's important just to like to not say it as expanding the use of funding, more like aligning a previous very specific tax to what we actually do in management today.
I appreciate that a lot, because I think for us that do always hit on the large case open space and the small case open space, it's a transparency thing. I think we as staff do not want to get across saying, what are you doing? We want it to be a transparent conversation. I think the way you framed that was perfect.
Because I think open space, the capital open space program does three different things to me. Like it focuses on spaces that are going to be preserved in a natural state and maybe restored natural state as just habitat and ecology that are valuable by themselves. It requires agricultural space that we plan for leases, which there's no public access to, but they are of value in their own way. Then there's open space that's intended for public access or potential trails and use and picnicking and what have you. And the public doesn't really, I think of it that way.
No.
And they may expect things are different when they have access to all the space that they're buying. And that articulation of why those things are each individually valuable is really important. Not for this meeting necessarily, but I think that it's a really hard thing to get to good understanding on without spending like a couple hours really learning about it. And so we have to recognize that people have their own presuppositions of what it means to be open space, and the council may as well. So the council's chance to educate, I think, because they have asked you to. So you can go in there, but it is complex.
My only concern would be is if it becomes I don't know, something that complicates just reauthorizing and you know, giving permanent extension. So, you know, I love the idea. I think it's great to put it out there, and then I don't know if you have an opportunity to do like any kind of polling or anything to understand whether there's like language with that expansion versus language out.
There's no time.
No.
No.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I think that's something we talk about. Definitely, is this one
That's
thing
my only
we could
concern.
get off the rails by doing that.
So, not a spin, just a perspective shift to, we'd like to use permission to use this money to maintain and take care of all of our outdoor lands that we've acquired through whatever means we've acquired them. Like, you know, we got a bargain. Somebody else paid for it. But we still need to take care of it. Like, that's just, like, yeah. Well, except for we're not going to continue to take care of it, because in some of them we don't have the money to take care of it. But we need that money to go to Button Rock. Like, we need some of the money that didn't go to the infrastructure of taking care of. Now we need to make sure we can fund that. So we want to make sure that we can fund the care for our land. And that, to me, is what the continuation of the open space is mostly should be focusing on. Not so much acquisition, because the acquisition gets dicey, but caring for land, stewarding land, and taking care of it, and acquiring it where needed and where available and where it makes sense for our community is great. But like taking care of it.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned the aligning the open space tax, to align the open space tax with, you know, other care for properties that the city owns that our residents expect us to care for, that currently, because of technicalities, we can't. So figuring out how to word that.
Well, that's great. Actually,
And
what you just
it
said
sounds
in
like
like
you're
real
stealing from
English
the pot of
words.
money.
Right.
Exactly. And that's what, so for me,
Yeah.
I think what I was hearing a little bit, I'd like to, as we think about this, is that those properties that meet those open space values. So if this was a property put through a filter, if we looked at Button Rock and put through that filter, it meet the first criteria, the second criteria, and the third criteria. And hopefully that would keep it from ending up like, here's a street that needs to be repaved, and it gets you from a park to a park, so let's use it for repaving streets.
Oh, I like that, the filter, yeah, I like
I
that.
like your
Because, yeah, we
filter.
don't want, like, yeah, no, we don't want a willy-nilly, like, I don't wanna pay for my lemonade stand or whatever, you know? Yeah. Great.
Are there concerns from this group of us at least having those conversations right now
With council?
with council?
No, that's great.
I mean, I have concerns about the state of the world right now.
Yeah.
And reaching any subject, period, in the state of the world right now is very dicey.
It is.
But there's no guarantee it's going to get better. It may just get worse. So let's do it now. And it's like when the dentist gives you forewarning that in 5 years you're going to need something, you know, like, yeah.
Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
expand piece, I like the idea of alignment. I lost my train of thought, but I think I like using the whole phrase ecological restoration in the language because we're speaking to it brings you back to the open space criteria, which, you know, we'll put in this presentation so you can see it, but like that phrase is different, you know, because if you have a different lens, if you're like putting utilities in or something, reclamation of land afterwards and ecological restoration are different things for different purposes, and so to me, as a trained restoration ecologist, that phrase has meaning and makes anybody with any lens think about, oh, that's different. I mean, that's not oil and gas reclamation, that's ecological restoration.
It also blunts the idea that it's all about this, the focus on you know, building, housing, and primary employment. It's, you know, those are things that we spend a lot more time focusing on as a community than we do any of this. So when this comes up, this needs to be the focus, and that we need to understand that it's not it's a false choice to continue to try to push that.
I totally agree. I think it's a false either or that's presented. And that in fact the open space strategy of the city is 100% in alignment with the city's plan to develop and increase population and jobs. Like it's 100% in alignment.
And
I think
sustain quality of life.
and the Longmont planning area is key to that, and it's like the most misunderstood thing. I talk to my neighbors about these kind of things. The most misunderstood part of development in the city is that this is all aligned to 40 years of planning in the city. And open space does not acquire within that area, and building does not generally happen outside of it. And those two things are in alignment, not in conflict.
Right.
And that's the core of the entire strategy. And this shows it really well, I think, but it's still an underappreciated part of why Longmont is the way it is.
Right. Every chance you get, keep on coming back to it, so it's, because you know how it is when you're selling something to folks, you have to say it again and again and again. Everybody knows to buy Charmin. So,
And I think there are certain words that do key into different demographics as well. Like ecological restoration, I agree, and that gets one set of demographics. But you look at very conservative farm owners and ranchers, and the words they use is take care of the land. And I think, so if you can slide take care of the land a few times in there, we're inviting in a whole group of other people instead of excluding them, you know, so like using different word choices and then repeating them over again, just really includes people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, really do appreciate you doing that.
I'm all excited for it.
It's like 2 days.
go
I don't like
get
to
a
spend
bagger.
summer evenings in the
You're not
They kind of want to spend the summer
Good
evening.
to get that processing.
All right, thank you guys for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate
Let us know next time how it goes.
it. Absolutely.
Okay, let's meet.
Welcome to the 23rd.
Come to council.
Yeah, come to council.
The gift is to go someplace. Like,
There you go.
yeah, like that to me is
But
better
there's
than
also
something I
a-
could
there's
receive that
also
I have to put
All right.
someplace or
more
something. This
good.
is
We
great.
don't want to miss
Any
out.
items of
Find a
discussion from the
balance.
packet updates from the board, or from staff, I guess, but from us? Comments in the packet or questions from the packet?
I did. We don't have a date yet for, Isaac Long being awarded, right? This is what it looks like. So historically, we've said that the detour is always gonna be the same detour, but then there's this language that said you could take, because of the huge amount of time difference, because now we're talking late 2026 for this section to possibly be done. Will we revise that and say you could potentially detour off of Boston Avenue, or are you keeping the original detour, but then there is the other language that you could still walk or ride up to Boston Avenue once the bridge is complete?
And I'll have to get back to you on that one.
And I will say I will support us pushing that forward and asking that
Because I
question.
would be in favor of that as well, I just don't have the answer right now. But let me talk to that group over there.
Yeah, I hope that helps, because again, that's one of Stephanie's first things I did was your
Right,
input. I took
right.
Stephanie on regards to how can we fix this, and it's not on our court, but we're willing to definitely take
I just
it.
need to know better what their logistics are, but let me engage those two that are running the levy and the Boston Bridge project, just to get a sense of when that's done, what stays intact and what might become available. I just can't answer it without asking them, but I will.
Questions? No? Go ahead.
I have another question, so it's for Ben. So the 22 versus 23 numbers, looks like numbers are great, they go up by like 11%. Yeah, but then because rate increases, the revenue goes up 26%, right? So, I mean, what's your anticipated growth, I guess, for 24? Because I mean, that's
I don't
a
have a
huge.
projection for 24 yet. I mean, we have
Yeah,
budget revenue,
Yeah.
which, we try to be conservative. So, we expect, I think the easiest way to look at that is to look at what I'm putting out monthly. That can project. I'm not comfortable giving that out right to you guys right now because I'm just not comfortable with it. I don't feel like it's set solid enough. We've had discussions about why we have different ways of figuring out where we think we might want to be. We are projecting to be good, solid with budget this year in a good situation going into 24. We expect that the increases, the roughly 10% increases, hold. We certainly don't expect our numbers to go down. So, and at the same time, there's also growth because you see growth in participation, and we see that across the board. So we expect both growth due to increases to increase for 25, but also growth in participation, which that won't keep continuing like it was for the last couple of years, obviously. We're back to maximum capacity in a lot of cases, i.e. day camp. The rec center is very, very busy at certain times. We're kind of back to that world again. But we always look at opportunities also. And then some of that's budget dependent. We have some big budget questions in right now, and we'll see how that pans out here in 6 weeks.
Okay, because that's gonna be my kind of follow-up question is, where is that plateau if you are 80% revenue is based on facilities? If you max out with facilities, you really can't go anywhere.
With the stuff with cost recovery, we are working on a program for that. It's interwoven a little bit with the current budget. In fact, I have some stuff due to the budget folks in the next couple of days that'll put together some modeling. We do plan on taking forth a proposal to council in the next.
I
I think you should share a little bit about that.
Okay.
Because you're
Well, I don't want to.
saying a lot, but not saying anything.
Well, okay. Thank you.
Since it's okay.
That's what I'm asking for.
Because all we can do is propose. I mean,
Yeah.
council makes the decision.
Yeah, so we have essentially a new cost recovery model to propose. Based on that, with the way things are, the new reality post-COVID, with the way society is choosing to pay people at this time, minimum wage being as high, we're at 40% roughly from what we were paying people rates since in 2018, 2019. We can't grow that fast. That's impossible. And we can't and don't want to increase our rates like that. That prices people out. So we have a new model that will reduce that cost from 80 to some other number, 70, 75. Well, that's what we're working on kind of now. We'll let that finalized. We're also looking at pulling some of the things we do, specifically looking toward outdoor schools, out towards swim lessons, therapeutic recreation, out of cost recovery into a new GL, general ledger account that would not be accounted for cost recovery. It still will be revenue producing. It just won't be tied to the main cost recovery of the rec center and adult sports, youth sports, frankly, all will still live in that one. And we have some other ideas within there that include getting credit for doing scholarships, credit, because that's not real money to us, but yet we provide the services. And expanding the scholarship program on top of that, because it has been forever since we started. Yeah, so we've been offering $100. Well, $100 isn't the same as it was 25 years ago. So expanding that. So it's all a package that we have put together that I'd love to give to you guys. But that's kind of the gist of where we're going with that right now. And we have support from management for sure to take a solid look at this, or as a financial impact. And that's kind of where they're going to be digging in over the next month behind the scenes of budget folks.
And maybe it'll have to be phased in. But one of the things, especially with the outdoor pools, is a goal of trying to actually reduce what we charge to make it more affordable for folks in our community to take more advantage of that. And we really feel like our cost recovery does not allow us to be community friendly. It ends up excluding people.
And then that does allow us also, the flip side of that, the part that stays within cost recovery, for us to change those fees a little bit more flexible to be able to address those issues there and try to take care of those core things that are with the largest community impact and swim lessons that Jeff and I and all of us in recreation consider to be the most important thing that we do. So that makes sense. Any questions on that presentation?
Does that go to, when does that go to council, or what is the process?
I don't have a timeline. I have something in writing that I have, the finance folks have signed off on the idea of. So right now I'm giving them some numbers to play with. So what do these buckets look like, given some projections? And when they do that, then we'll run it up through Harold and Jim and then get it out to council.
Timeline in August, that has to be to Harold and Jim. With our thought is that sometime in September with the budget presentations, that we share that with council at that time.
Is that something we should put on our August agenda?
It probably would be a good idea to do that.
Yeah, I would like to be at the point of being able to give you guys something that we're actually presenting, and we should be. That was my intent, and you're gonna give them information and then hopefully get the actual proposal. It's really, I think, done, but get those final things that are really those budgetary impact items.
Love the idea of rethinking self-imposed constraints.
Well, I wouldn't say they're self-imposed.
Somebody,
right.
But like kind of arbitrary constraints,
Yeah.
like why do we do this? Well, I don't know, because we always did.
There was a number that was picked. That's
Right.
it.
Yeah, it's really good to think about it.
And it's yeah, trying to, that world just doesn't quite work. It's just,
I had a question about Sunset. I saw that the numbers are really good for Sunset this year. I've been there a bunch. It's been booming. It's been great. I was wondering about the hours it's open until in the evening and how it's working out with the full facility rentals. If those have been popular and it's rented out every night
yeah.
or not. I just didn't
We're-
see that, the numbers for that.
Yeah, our rentals, yeah, we didn't include rentals in our little snapshots.
Yeah.
Rentals are, I think, full for the
Okay.
summer.
Okay.
We've expanded that program, and it's pretty much been full for the summer, I think.
And is that seen as a good trade-off revenue-wise versus keeping the pool open for 2 more hours
Yes.
for passes?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't get a lot of folks for dropping that time of day, so doing parties and things like that definitely add in a revenue. And get more people in the pool, which is cool.
Do you still have morning lap swimming and everything like that?
All those things we've always had. Yeah, it's been booming. It's nice warm weather.
It's good. Yeah.
This weekend should be very good.
And the parking lot's reopened now too, so it's nice. Other questions from the packet? Any? Doesn't sound like it. Okay. Any items from staff?
I would like to just talk about the 4th of July event.
I would like you to as well, yeah.
It was pretty busy. I think the weather couldn't have been any better for it. We counted over 9,000 people at the gates and really were,
Just for the festival?
yeah, pretty compacted for pretty tight space. But overall, I think our first time was very successful. I think the things that were what I will call somewhat negative were some things that you just can't tell until you get there. We had 8 food trucks. There were some people that were standing in line for 2 hours waiting to get food.
Yeah.
The line for beer and beverages was also long at times. But I would say the servers probably really earned their money that night. It was the type of thing I was telling Paige before we started that at Wibby's, you were here with your beer like this and you couldn't move very much because you were going to spill it on someone else or on you. You know, there were two types of groups, I would say, that went to the event. There was the entertainment group that wanted music and beverages, and then there was the other group of people that were staking out space to watch the drone show and the fireworks.
Well, that drone show was something
Yeah, it was
else,
pretty
and I will
impressive.
say, it almost surpassed, I mean,
It was amazing.
I didn't want to
it
see it.
surpassed my expectations, and it surpassed, I think, that, you know, fireworks are fireworks are fireworks, you know, but I'm saying that drone show, if it was just outstanding.
Yeah.
If we could get that for winter holiday or something
Yeah.
like that, man,
We actually
alive.
talked about that today. But thank you to council and to the city manager for trusting us to do the event. The staff was great. Thank you to David and the Rangers. They did an outstanding job of keeping people out of the Dickens Nature Area. And it just, for a short time to organize things, it really all fell into place. And I think the community overall was pretty happy with it.
And Jeff doing and other duties as assigned.
So you think that
Have
we
truck
need
will
12 food trucks and,
The problem with right there is
Where to put them.
Yeah.
if we're putting them anywhere, we're displacing people. And we didn't have enough, it was very tight as it was, so it's.
Great problem to have for the first time.
Yeah.
Do you know the company?
How was it for the Rangers?
You know, I actually got there around 2, and there were people down along the beach area. Most people that were doing had set up blankets or chairs in the grassy areas, and they had been telling people coming in, there were signs there, so everyone pretty much knew they had to be out by 4 o'clock. They did a pass with the vehicles, and they talked to people first, and then with the bullhorn saying it's time to go, and people grumbled a little bit, but everyone left, and there was really no problem with that, so.
That's great.
You know, we did allow people to continue moving through, so we could get people to Martin and Main Street and stuff, but no one set up, no one stayed there, there was no loitering during the fireworks at all, so.
Did they allow people to watch fireworks from the bridge?
From Martin Street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So people put their chairs up on.
Yeah, so when they left the beach area, they could go up onto Martin Street and they could watch fireworks up there too.
That was
People were doing that on Main Street.
Yeah, they didn't agree to do that.
That's all I have.
Cool.
Yeah,
I was-
it was
So
great.
good job,
That was
guys.
great. Do you feel like a template for future years?
It's a starting
Starting
point. I
place,
think we learned some things and, you know, need to talk about the location. Is that the right place? If it is, how do we expand the footprint, those kind of things.
I should comment, I went to the Roosevelt Orchestra thing, which was great. Little involvement from the city, I think, because it was all around the orchestra, but it only worked because it was the nicest day in 2 weeks, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been a heat stroke disaster, but it worked really well to be up there.
And it helped where we were too, for the same
Yeah.
reason. You had 10 degrees to the asphalt, and
Yeah.
it's just, that's a lot hotter. I mean, it was perfect.
Yeah, I think the only way you could possibly expand is if you were to close 287 and go across the way to like.
Did you talk to Harold?
Yeah, you talked to you.
No, is that,
That's
that's
one of
what,
the proposals for.
oh, I'm just thinking,
Yes.
logical.
Love it.
We've got ideas. Lots of ideas.
So
Yeah.
bottom line is we did too good a job and we'll be doing it.
I did really think it came together well, given the really difficult challenge.
Sam
given.
Feldman is our coordinator for our events, and she is as good as.
There was good communications too about where to go and things that were happening.
Yeah,
and
there
it
was.
was quite good.
I had an idea for the drone show. You guys gave me one for the winter. Have just reindeer and sleigh that could like passes over like
That'd be
during
cool.
Longmont lights or something like that. That'd
The
be-
problem we're hearing is you cannot do it over
Can't do
any
it
buildings.
people.
Over buildings or people.
Yeah,
And
so,
it takes a ginormous amount of room. That's
Yeah.
why I said Dickens.
yeah.
Which almost takes any opportunity away from Longmont Lights to be able to.
Which was actually another reason to have the area closed too, so.
So you
Yeah,
can't
you
do it
can't.
over buildings, okay?
You can't even, like, Roosevelt Park's not big.
Right.
There's drones over
It's
my
like
house
they-
all the
they-
time. I
and-
don't know how we
And
can't
then
do
there's
it.
no
Like,
room to view it because you gotta be
You're
from
trying
the
to
side.
Yeah. There's a giant decay. If like those things are moving at 27 miles an hour, and if they just get, they just to the east of the water.
Here's
So
your
We've
point
actually
there.
another huge
I,
open space there for you.
in November, I spoke directly with the FAA about this, and I pointed out
Just do it there.
to them, I said,
During Longmont.
about drones, I said, with the lithium batteries and everything, people's just poor choice of things, especially after the Marshall Fire. They were talking about deliveries and stuff like this, and I said, how do we stop that? But more importantly, I said, like drones wanted to come up and show like Button Rock Dam area and everything like that. And their response was, and you're gonna love this because it's really, it will warm your heart, we can action afterwards. That means that if they burn the forest down around Button Rock Dam, I said, just to clarify it, you can go and sue the people who did it afterwards, right?
Yeah, because that makes such a difference.
And they said, yeah, and I said, this just smacks of the fact that, in 1981, they fired all these guys, and now you've got what you got. You've got people that just do not understand the ecological aspects of it.
I don't really mind the drone that goes over my house though. Just-
No, but I'm just saying,
Okay.
it will
There's
happen
probably
more.
some kid
It'll
that
probably
just
happen
is
more and
bored
more
all summer,
often, is
right?
what their concern is
Yeah.
because of the fact that Amazon wants to do drone delivery. And that's where they start talking about, I said, what about 80-mile-an-hour winds? And they were like, we can action afterwards. In case somebody uses poor decisions.
Any more stack bumps above to talk about?
I
Okay,
just wanted to give
we got
some-
5 minutes if we can finish it.
So, that's the one you saw last week, but I have some new photos. It's just kind of fun, I thought maybe we'll do like 4-week updates, just kind of, because we see you every 4 weeks. But they're putting in the big under drain system now, which is just huge, just to move all that water from those failing fields, and it's pretty incredible. These were actually taken today. And then they also are reusing some stone that Timber had in his team, I can't recall where they were storing it. But we're gonna be repurposing that over there to prevent cars from driving between the trees at the tree lawn onto the fields from Longmont. So it's just a way to have kind of a natural barrier. And then,
If you guys have them, I would love some talking points about why it makes sense to put artificial turf there.
I get honest, put a lot of those
question
together.
all the time, like,
Yeah.
why are they replacing natural grass?
it's actually been published in the Times Call now, and several, I think it got picked up on by other news sources, but I can have her send out
Yeah.
something.
That'd be great.
Fox Meadows Future Park, the sign is now behind the fence. So it's, it's interesting because we have Clover, Fox, Dry Creek, and now Thompson under construction. And that makes it very visible. And so when you're visible, then it becomes very visible. And whenever I walked in and you asked the question about Thompson and the timing, if you do or if you don't, there's going to be opinions on both sides of that.
No, I know.
And so,
Yeah.
so it's just tough, and so, with these projects, getting them fenced in, starting the site logistics, getting all of the erosion control measures in and all of that, it's gonna get the project done. So we're just staying the course, we're continuing forward. So as exciting as it is, it's just fun to see Future Park Muffins. Spring Gulch, now they did, I don't have the same slides, I just put, anyway. These are what you saw last week. So the delay right now, today they were out there. DeFalco has run into some challenges, and they are delayed as it noted in your state packet, or your packet. But they have some sandstone walls down here that they put in where it's going around into the underpass, and they're gonna have to do some rework on some of that. So now we're another 3 weeks behind.
From the packet, or the packet is accurate?
It might be from the packet.
So August?
Late August?
And then Thompson, as you all know now, it has, the west sidewalk's closed, that's part of where they're going to be doing all of their mobilization, moving their equipment into the playground area. They will be putting a fence around the shelter area, and they're gonna be starting these activities over the next 4 weeks. For the demolition, the surveying, and the grading. So a lot of things are gonna start disappearing in Thompson and had you worked with Elisa on I know you had talked about something.
I don't need to bring it up if you don't want to.
It's okay.
Okay. I did, she's been very helpful.
Okay. I think those are all the updates we have. Oh, Nino is out to bid. So it's gonna be, the bids are coming in on the 24th of July. Well, that we get bids. But I think it's favorable. So, yeah. Garden Acres is getting ready, it has started design. The first kickoff design meeting was today. Roosevelt Park, that SOP is going out, not in June, it's going out in July on whatever it's stated in the packet. I think it's the 12th or something. And then Dog Park 1, that SOP is in the works with procurement right now. And then Danielle and Sarah already gave that update, so that's all we have on that.
Okay, any other items, or we can?
I do have one piece, and we can put it on after you bang the gavel. I learned something really cool today. I asked Taylor to put it up as you guys are walking on, if you watch it. They did a little video with the volunteer program, and I thought it was, yes.
Actually, Stephanie, do you want to just log back in? I can just Teams it to you.
Okay.
That's probably easier than trying to do it with my
So yeah,
computer
if you
again.
guys want to gavel it out and let her do it. I thought it was, I saw it, like, oh, something happens that I don't even know about.
It's
Something.
a very feel good way to end the meeting.
It's a good feel good way, yes.
It's very cool.
While she's doing that, can I just ask her a question? And it sort of relates to our open space presentation, but I would love maybe at our next meeting to talk about what it would look like to revisit the Dry Creek master plan. Because I know, we heard like this, all of these things that are being planned to implement there and kind of build it out like another sandstone of sorts. But I think there's a lot of value in retaining more of the natural area there, and I think we heard some of that from the community when we were talking about the rec center. So
I had 3 people contact me and had a sit-down meeting that wanted it more natural, and why were we doing all this? And I said, this was not open space, this was always a park. I said, maybe there's some sort of discussion that can go on with that one up further, that, because.
The neighborhood park adjacent to it.
But I said, that's not for me to call, it's something you'll have to,
I'd like to have
We
the
can have that
conversation.
conversation. I'll tell you, I get those calls too.
You don't have to log in to watch it.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah, if you just press the back button.
Okay, because I'm like, I don't want.
I've just been trying to remind people
Just
that
X out.
we do a great job of buying open space and then trying to look at our neighborhood and community parks and those needs throughout the city. And I think Stephanie and her team is looking at design, taking those natural elements and really building it into that is something we do. But there's nothing that stops us from having further conversations
The
with the
question is
timeline.
about, like, as master plans age,
Right.
are we stuck with them if they're not relevant to what has happened in the community
I don't
in the
agree.
meantime?
But
How is it not relevant though? We haven't added athletic complex for you.
no, I agree, that's, I think that's just, there's more of the sense that some of the community,
our side over here is if you all tell us what to build, we'll build it.
I just like to have a conversation.
Yeah,
because
I think that's absolutely fine. I just, again, we're not the decision maker.
Well, in all fairness, in our CIP, first off, we need to see what year it might be, to plan ahead for that piece, and we don't know. So that's, a larger park, so.
But yes, I think we definitely have a conversation. Taylor, you want to send us out on a?
We're gonna, want to do this during the meeting or want to adjourn?
Voluntary.
You got the.
It's 53 seconds.
I move that we wait for 53 seconds to adjourn.
I'll second.
Yeah, let's get it.
All in favor? Aye. Great.
Oh,
Yeah, it's muted there. There you go.
It's muted again.
Muted is up again, it's weird.
To serve your community and be outdoors.
Where's that?
Sandstone.
Oh, the ground.
No, I need a lot of people.
This is where I live. These are the places that I use.
When learning, I'm always learning new things, but every time I volunteer.
It's a way to give back.
When I come, I just look and walk around and, sit down and something good.
Volunteering is something you're interested in doing. Feel free to sign up on our website at longmont.givepulse.com.
very cute.
Thank you for indulging me.
All right.
Thank you, Taylor.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.